What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here, and today I am bringing you an updated Melffy Spright deck profile. For those of you that follow my community posts here on YouTube, you will know that I was able to take second place at my locals with this deck yesterday, so let's go ahead and show you guys the build. And before we get into the build, I just want to let you guys know that I am dropping a limited release double-sided metal field center. I'm going to put it somewhere on the screen now. The art that you're currently seeing is unfinished. My artist is still working on some of the shading and then the backgrounds, but once that's done, the pre-orders will be live on Friday, June 23rd. Make sure you guys are ready for it. Again, it is a limited release, only 100 will be sold, so if you guys are liking what you're seeing, make sure that you're ready for that on June 23rd. So, as we know, Spright took a very minor hit on the Forbidden and Limited list that we just got on June 6th, and that was Starter 2-2, and while that does hit the consistency a little bit, there are still plenty of consistency cards for this deck, because pretty much every single one of your Spright names is an extender, so we upped some of the names a little bit. We're going to go ahead and show you guys those ratios. Starting things off, we have 3 copies of Spright Blue, pretty standard, doesn't really need to be explained, the searches every single monster that you have. 3 copies of Spright Jet. This is arguably the best Spright card because the spells and traps that you are able to search off of it are just absolutely insane. We have 2 copies of Spright Red and 1 copy of Spright Carrot. Now, if you've been watching the channel for the better part of a year, pretty much ever since Spright came out last August, you know that I was always a big believer in double red, because I thought that having 1 an additional extender and 2 an additional monster negate for if your board gets outed or anything like that was just incredibly strong, and that was what the mindset was making this deck, but honestly, I think I might do the reverse of what you're seeing now and do 2 Carrot and 1 red, because the format we're in, it feels like spells and traps are just so much more impactful, so if you're able to stop them just really strong, especially into something like evenly matched, that is why I lost one of my games yesterday. I got even lead, and that's just that. So yeah, moving forward, I'm gonna test it out doing 2 Carrot, 1 red, but for now, this is the ratio. And then the final Spright name we have is 1 copy of Spright Pixies. This is a card that a lot of people were cutting, but with the loss of Spright Starter, I do just want additional names that I'm able to extend with. Not just that, a lot of people aren't going to expect to get hit by a Pixies, and it's essentially just an honest for your level, rank, and link 2s. So really strong and can definitely catch people off guard. Then we are still playing the Nimble package for obvious reasons. It is just pretty free. We have our 3 Beaver and our 2 Angler. Being able to send the Angler off of the sprint is insane. Plus, Beaver is a 1-card full combo that ends you on, I believe it's 7 interruptions. I will show you guys the combo at the end of the video. And that combo is somewhat interchangeable. You can do 2 different 1-card variants, which is Beaver or Starter, and then there's multiple 2-card variants, which is pretty much just any 2 level 2s. Then we have our very small Melffy package. We have the Caddy and the Penny. This is literally just to make an Omni Negate / pseudo Macrocosmos on your opponent's turn. Really strong, plus you're actually also able to get a negate, and I'll go over an interaction once we get there in the extra deck. We do have our 1 copy of Ibly. I think that this card is just incredibly strong, especially going into a format where I still believe that Kashtira is the best deck. Pretty much if you don't have to summon your blue off of your Gigantic because you already opened it or you had Starter or whatever it is, the Gigantic is able to summon the Ibly. You link the Ibly into the Sprint. Not only can you then chain block your Sprint, but you can also give them the Ibly and prevent them from doing things, whether it's special summoning or activating cards that require them to have nothing on field. Really insanely strong card. We have 3 copies of Kashtira Fenrir. Now, if you remember my Melffy Spright deck profile from the 250th YCS, I was playing 3 copies of E-Telly and 3 copies of Psy-Frame Geared Gamma as additional extenders as well as hand traps. Unfortunately, that is no longer an option thanks to the list putting Gamma to 1. So I think Fenrir is a really good extender. The way that I describe it to people is at the absolute worst case scenario, it's an extender into Sprint, because Sprint only requires 1 level 2 monster, so you can special Fenrir, normal like an Angler or something if you bricked, and then go into your Sprint and get your full combo. Best case scenario, it's an additional interruption on your end board, and that's just really strong. Then we have some hand traps. We have 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. This is interchangeable with literally any other hand trap. I played it because of how strong it was in the previous format, and I still think that it definitely has its uses against Kashtira. You know, you can stop after the Unicorn Fenrir field spell, etc. And it's just really strong, but honestly, it kind of underperformed yesterday, so I might swap it out for something like a Veiler or maybe even Ghost Bell. I think Ghost Bell's really strong moving into the format. And then we have our 3 copies of Ash Blossom, and that is is going to round out the monsters. Moving on to the spells, we have 1 copy of Gamma Burst and 1 copy of Smashers. Gamma Burst is an insane card. Like, a lot of people weren't originally playing it. It's definitely seen some more play recently, but giving 1400 attack to literally every level, rank, and link 2 that you control, absolutely nuts. You can, I literally won a game yesterday because I was able to stop my opponent with hand traps. They ended on no monsters and 1 set back row. I specialed blue, specialed jet, specialed, I think, red. Jet searched me starter because I already had the Gamma Burst, started into Carrot, and then Gamma Burst made that game just off 4 summons into a blank board. Like, it was nuts. Smashers is Smashers, don't really need to explain that. We have our 2 copies of Spright starter. Obviously, we would play 3 if we could, but they did hit it down to 2. Again, a little bit of a consistency hit, but that's why we upped the number of extenders we're playing. We have 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. This is technically a flex spot. This is what I threw into the deck because I had 2 spots left and didn't really know what to do. Shout out to my friend Gibby. He actually is the one that recommended this, and it works. Not really sure. I might want to main deck something like Cosmic Cyclone or Lightning Storm just because there are some very threatening back row cards in the current format, with Vanquish Soul and Labyrinth being relevant now. But Triple Tactics Talent works. Again, this is the flex spot. You can really play what you want in this slot. We have our 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity for consistency. Spright is already a hyper-consistent deck, so why not add more consistency into it to make sure that you're always able to play? A lot of times what I end up doing with my Prosperity is doing my full combo and Prosperitying after. That way the deck has been thinned and I can dig for something like hand traps. Works really well. That's it for the spells. We have our 1 copy of Spright Double Cross, and then our 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. That is the main deck at 40 cards. Let's show you guys the extra. The extra deck that I have is admittedly still under construction, but there are a lot of weird ratios that I will explain to you guys as we're going. First of which is actually going to be 3 copies of Gigantic Spright. Now, if you guys watched my original Melffy Spright deck profile, you know that I was playing 3. That way, if they rip it out with something like Mind Hacker or Unicorn, that I wouldn't just instantly lose, and that is still kind of the reason. Even though we no longer have Mind Hacker to worry about, Unicorn is still a massive threat. The thing with Kashtira is pretty much all of their monsters are boss monsters, so they could end on Unicorn Fenrir, and that is still a terrifying board. If I hand trap them while they have Unicorn up, they can rip out 1 Gigantic Spright, and then on my turn, if I activate another monster effect, they can rip out another Gigantic Spright, which is why I feel like it's mandatory to play 3, just because if you are playing 2 and they do end on Unicorn Pass, you pretty much would just lose to it. So yeah, 3 feels incredibly mandatory. Then we have our Melffy of the Forest. This is for the Melffy combo. The reason you don't play more than this is because going second, you're really not going into your Melffy stuff anyway, so you don't need to worry about them ripping it out if they went first. You have other plays going second, so you don't really need to max out on that. We have our 1 copy of Cat Shark. This is a flex spot. I really just wanted to be able to go for OTKs into boards, and that is a really strong way to do it, making a 6400 attack Gigantic Spright. Then we have 1 copy of Onibimaru, really good card. I think that this card is mandatory for Fluwanderies. Fluwanderies has seen a decline, but it's starting to pick back up again. If you've been paying attention to any of the regionals, there have been quite a few top cut Fluwanderies, and Onibimaru is pretty much the only way that you have to out something like an Empen. Summon it in defense, banish the Empen, and then go off with the rest of your cards. We have our Ninja Mosquito and our Downward Magician. These are obviously part of the Zeus package, but not just that. Ninja Mosquito actually has a niche OTK, where if you can put 3 monsters on board on top of the Ninja Mosquito, and they have anything that's like 3000 attack, you can keep swinging into their monsters and dealing 3k damage, which is incredibly insane. We have Nightmare Cerberus and Nightmare Phoenix. Phoenix is obvious, but Cerberus I feel is actually really good because of Kashtira. Like I said, all of their monsters are boss monsters, and they do have to be in the main monster zone, so Cerberus being able to out them is incredibly strong. In fact, that is how I won one of my games at the 250th YCS, so when I was rebuilding this deck, I definitely made sure to include it. We have our 2 copies of Spright Sprint. Again, this is because we are still respecting Kashtira, and Unicorn is still a diet Mind Hacker, so we don't want them to rip out our only Sprint and prevent us from comboing. And finally, the last card in the extra deck is going to be the Herald of Arclight. This is the Omni Negate that we can potentially use twice, thanks to Spright Double Cross, but not just that, it just flat out murders some decks, being a pseudo macro Cosmo, making any card sent from hand or deck to the graveyard banished instead. So really, really strong, and yeah, that's going to be the extra. Now, because I forgot forgot to mention it while we were actually on the card, Melffy of Forest has a really cool interaction into something like Kashtira, because if it is on the field and you have your caddy, let's say they do something like special summon Unicorn, you return the caddy to your hand and add your penny, then as turn player they would have to use their priority to make Unicorn Chainlink 1 if they would want to use it, and when they do, you can chain the Melffy of the Forest as Chainlink 2 to then negate the effects of the Unicorn and make it unable to attack. Then you can chain the penny that you just added, getting your Herald of Arclight on field, so now just because they special the Unicorn, they can't use it, it's negated, they have a monster on field so they better have Birth, and you got an Omni negate out of it, and that's just really cool interaction that I want to make sure you guys understood. Works the same with Fenrir. If they special Fenrir, you go ahead and bounce the caddy, do the same thing, negate the Fenrir, there's nothing they can really do, and that's why I feel like this deck has a really incredible Kashtira matchup. Okay, so for the combo, you are able to do this in a plethora of different ways. Both of the one-card combos are going to be Spright Starter and Nimble Beaver, but you can do this with a plethora of two-card combos, literally any two names. They don't even have to both be level 2s, because you can do something like Fenrir and a level 2 as well, and then it just slightly changes the sequencing, but we're going to go ahead and show you guys the best variant of the combo, which is Spright Starter. So we're going to go ahead and activate our Spright Starter. This is going to summon our copy of Spright Blue from our deck, which will activate the effect of our Spright Blue, letting us add our copy of Spright Jet. Now, because we control a level 2 monster, we can go ahead and special summon out our Spright Jet, which is going to activate its effect and add our copy of Spright Double Cross. Here we'll take the Jet and the Blue, and this is going to overlay into our copy of Gigantic Spright, and because we are able to start with the starter, we don't need to go into our Blue off of the Gigantic. That lets us use our Gigantic to instead summon a copy of Ibly. Now, this is why the Spright Starter is the better variant, because it ends on Ibly locking your opponent, whereas just Beaver doesn't. Pretty much any way that you can go into Blue without the Gigantic Spright will end on the same combo with the Ibly lock, so if you open the Blue, you're perfectly fine, but I just want to show you guys the one-card combo, and if you open the Beaver, you don't actually have to link away the Gigantic Spright, but in this combo you do. So we're going to go ahead and link away the Nightmare Corruptor Ibly and the Gigantic Spright, and this is going to go into our copy of Spright Sprind. Here we're going to activate Sprind as Chainlink 1 and Chain Block with Ibly as Chainlink 2. We're going to go ahead and give the Ibly to our opponent, so just pretend this is on our opponent's field, and then the Spright Sprind is going to send the copy of Nimble Angler from the deck to the graveyard. This is of course going to activate the Nimble Angler, giving us our 2 copies of Nimble Beaver summoned from the deck, and then we can take both of those Nimble Beavers and overlay them into a copy of Melffy of the Forest. Here we're going to use the effect of Melffy of the Forest, detaching one of the beavers to add us our copy of Melffy Caddy, and then we can set our Spright Double Cross and proceed to end phase. In the end phase, the Melffy Caddy is going to be able to summon itself, and while this doesn't look like that strong of a board, let me go ahead and break down all the interruptions for you. So as soon as our opponent commits a normal or special summon, we can activate the effect of Melffy Caddy, returning it to our hand, which will then of course add us our copy of Penny. Now do keep in mind that Caddy can actually add any beast, so if you already have the Penny in your hand, you can add another Beaver for follow-up, but in this case we're going to go ahead and add the Penny. That is going to allow us to then activate the Melffy of the Forest to target a monster our opponent controls and negates effects and make it unable to attack. So in the instance of playing against something like Kashtira, that is absolutely huge. Now they're just stuck with a body that they can't do anything with. But not just that, we can then activate our Penny to summon it to our side of the field and immediately synchro using itself and the caddy in our hand. This is going to go ahead and go into our copy of Herald of Arclight. So now we've already had one interruption. We now have an Omni Negate plus a pseudo Macrocosmo. When we use this to tribute as cost for an Omni Negate, we can go ahead and activate the Spright Double Cross to reborn it to our Sprind, giving us a second Omni Negate, so that is now 3 interruptions. We have the Spright Sprind for if they special summon, which at the moment they can't because they have a Ibly on field, but if they do, we can go ahead and use the Sprind to detach our Beaver off of our Melffy to return a monster on the field. So now we have, what was that, 1, 2, 3, 4 interruptions. They're locked under Ibly. This can technically be used as a Snatch Steal or DD Crow if you don't need the additional Omni Negate, and all of that still having 4 cards in hand, meaning we might have hand traps as well. And there you guys have it. That is going to be my post-ban list updated Melffy Spright deck profile. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon. Don't forget to check out the sponsor of our videos, Dueling Guard. Use my code INSANE18 for 5% off your entire purchase. And remember, on June 23rd, I am dropping my 100-piece limited run double-sided metal field center, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.